I would like to give the floor to Sandra Treija and Tamara Kalantajevska, and they will have a presentation on management aspects of houses.
Good afternoon. I have to say sorry as autumn viruses have had an effect on our team, and today I will have to present the presentation alone because the vocal cords of Tamar have suffered. And I would like to apologize for possible audio interferences during my presentation. We have been working with these issues for a while, and we have had certain consideration processes and certain thinking about possible future scenarios for our housing stock. And currently, we see how enormously complex this problem is. And this is one of the reasons why the renovation, revitalization of these estates is not moving forward as quickly as it would be necessary. We would like to say right away that we have chosen to study scenarios where these very large estates have to be renovated. There were questions from the audience: what would happen if, what is the actual time during which these houses can be resided in, and so on. But when we look at the ownership aspects, when we look at the urban development aspects, we currently do not see any possibility on how the most of inhabitants of Riga could successfully or in some way be moved to other places, to other types of housing. And how these regions, these districts could be significantly changed by demolishing, building, and so on. But currently we believe that we have only one option, and we have to consider everything to improve these buildings, to improve these areas, and to renovate these buildings. Today we saw wonderful proposals from the foreign colleagues as well as from Riga and students of Riga. Here you can see a proposal from Tamara's thesis devoted to Ziepniekkalns housing estate and its renovation. And our feeling when we look at these wonderful proposals and foreign experiences, we see that it's not actually a problem. There are many possibilities on how to make these regions sustainable, attractive, competitive for potential residents or existing residents. Of course, we face many challenges. We already heard about some during the previous presentations. Here you can see some of them. The most significant, we believe, is that these housing estates have never been managed properly, so they are quite obsolete. Also, the ownership structure is enormously complicated, both in the buildings as well as in the case of land plots. And this is a root of an enormous problem with regards to financial resources for this renovation. These resources are never sufficient. Also, the age structure of the inhabitants of these districts And then there is another problem that is not widely researched, though it has been mentioned, namely a specific peculiarity of these Soviet housing estates. Namely, currently, these people are the owners, but before they rented these flats, and they have a specific mentality. There was a simple procedure, the privatization of the apartments, so they did not change their location, they did not change the place, they did not change anything, and suddenly they became owners in the legal understanding of this term. But the mental understanding, the feeling of being an owner, that does not just spring out of nowhere, and it's a huge problem. As I said, these buildings that have not been built so long ago, and that was done by trying to create a uniform structure. Now they are fragmented in very small properties, in many small properties. So many people are involved, their interests differ. So we have to take into consideration not only the human factor, but also legal instruments, management models, and the understanding of people what is a quality residential space. As I mentioned, there are many wonderful possibilities on how to renovate these buildings and make them attractive. And this work is going on. For approximately 10 years it has been going on. But when we compile data from the Energy Agency of Riga and the Ministry of Economics on what has been achieved during the last decade, we see that only a bit more than 1% of all the buildings that need renovation are actually renovated. And this 1.2% represents the buildings that have been at least partially renovated, or maybe the design preparation or design work is still going on. So not all of these 1.2% have been completed. So, and if we work at this rate, then there's a question, when shall we actually finish this process? And it is most probably that the people and the buildings will be as patient as to wait for their turn. So there are possibilities, there is a wish, a desire, but something doesn't work. So we, together with Tamara, try to work in an area that is not maybe typical for an architect. We try to understand where this management system has failed, where it is not as effective as needed, because it's just obvious. And of course, this management system that is quite new, it has to face serious challenges, namely the complexity of the renovation process, the novelty of the structure, and the lack of experience with this situation and with these aspects when people have to work with so many owners of a movable property. Also, the enormous range of functions, starting from the management of housing. And this is what the management system actually does. But their functions would have to extend to many more issues. And this is what we see in the experience from other places. So we decided to research the experience from other countries. And the result was that the experience is mostly based not on the typology on the buildings. The problem is not related to the size of the housing, but to the fact that these apartments are privatized, that there is a huge number of owners of immobile property in one residential complex, and each of them have very varying possibilities, opportunities, opinions, and so on. Compiling the available information, and I have to say so that during the previous conference we had a speaker, Professor Aschenkova, who has researched a lot in this area. We used her studies, and we would like to offer a short overview of the experience from the selected countries, namely the Czech Republic, from Switzerland and Australia. And we tried to assess the differences and the common aspects with regards to the state policy in the case of the management of privatized apartments, legal aspects, organization of the management structure, the source of financial means or financial sources, and whether and to what extent human resources are important. Here I would like to present the most vivid experiences from these countries. The first case is the state support in the Czech Republic, where specific subsidies programs for the residential housing, a very serious type of support. Here you can see 3 programs: renovation program of the housing stock, renovation of typical or pre-designed houses, and the regeneration program of these residential districts. Here we saw that the state actually understands and supports the development in this area. What is interesting, we believe that the respective ownership law actually had 8 additions. This just shows that these issues are never easily solved anywhere. And like in our situation, the establishment of association of apartment owners was not mandatory, and the management and the type of management was not initially defined. The decision-making processes were also not precisely defined, and it was not possible to express positive opinions about the passive proportion or the passive group of apartment owners. But during these 8 editions, all these unclear issues were successfully solved. What is interesting when we looked at the Swiss experiences with regards to the privatized apartments and improvement strategies, here the law contained the basics, namely that the renovation measures have several levels. For example, as in the case of insurance. So there are basic measures or basic renovation. For example, if the roof is leaking, and there are specific improvements needed. And that can be initiated by only one owner of the apartment, because this is of importance to him or her. Then there is so-called optimum level, where most of the owners have to agree, like in our case, namely 50% plus one vote. And then there is a possibility to introduce specific qualities, aesthetic or maybe some others that are quite expensive. And then all the inhabitants of the respective building have to agree. A different approach, mostly concentrating on private initiatives and private financing, can be found in Australia, where approximately during the last 20 years, enormous privatization of the housing stock was carried out. And there was an emphasis placed on the PPP, or the public-private partnership, where the state housing agencies and municipalities participate as one member, and private investments are involved by means of various tools like savings of the owners, specific funds, and similarly. Also, restoration takes place quite extensively in Canada, in the north of America, where private investors are usually the main source of investment. Here you can see comparative tables where you can see quite clearly what the approaches are. In the Czech Republic, we can observe quite a lot of support from the state with regards to all aspects of this problem, while in Australia there is a quite clear market approach. As to management, here on this level, in all countries, not only in these three, also in our neighboring countries, in Estonia and Lithuania, and in almost all of of the research that we studied, there are usually apartment owners associations that are mandatory. But according to our legislation, this is not a mandatory requirement. But in most of the other countries, this is a mandatory measure, one of the basic elements for this initiative to be developed further. And the passive inhabitants are involved because they have to. Here you can see what I just explained. Namely, the owners' associations are mandatory with their structure, accounting principles, decision-making principles. Then the management types could vary: elected, voluntary, private companies, professional companies that participate in this renovation process. Of course, it sounds very nice theoretically, because these associations have to be established, and then this could serve as a guarantee of success. But we know very well, and many have visited our neighboring countries, Estonia and Lithuania, where this requirement of the law about mandatory associations has been in force for many years, almost 20. That's when the privatization process began, and we cannot see that mass renovation takes place there. Of course, there are certain examples, interesting examples, but there are still very many buildings that are not renovated, even the whole district. So the association is not a precondition of efficient operation. And our research shows, and other researchers show, that it is necessary to have active, motivated people that are interested in this renovation. And we decided to study their experiences. We interviewed them, the managers of these buildings, those that have already renovated their buildings in Latvia. Currently, we have 72 such buildings in Riga that have been either completed or in the process. This process also takes place in other towns of Latvia, like Valmiera and Liepāja. We are still interviewing these people, though we have the initial results already. And in almost all cases, when we asked what is the main source of your success, they claimed that the most important aspect was that the owners of apartments, or there was a very active person that among the owners of the apartments that could persuade the others. So we can see here that not all processes have rational grounds, because this power of persuasion is one of the main preconditions for these processes, these activities to even begin. Also, informative support is very important. Associations of owners was found to be the most optimum type of management. Support from municipalities is also important. As to financial sources, they have been quite varied. Of course, support from the state and the regional development fund, but there are buildings successfully renovated without the state support. And as to obstacles and drawbacks, the decision-making takes a lot of time, because the support of 50% plus 1 is needed in case of all decisions with regards to the development issues of the particular building. Here we can see a quote from a book by a representative from the Czech Republic, that goes very well together with what we heard during our interviews, that the result of management does not depend, or does depend on if there is a person who is very active and who is ready to be actively involved in this process. So these people who are active have to be found, have to be supported by financial or some other means, because they are the key for success. What we see in the Czech Republic is that irrespective of the structure of ownership, most of these, or almost all of these apartments, are owned by private individuals as well as the land, but the state and the municipality is ready to take responsibility for the management structures and their creation. And thank you for your attention. And this is one of the illustrations from Tamara's wonderful work on the development of Ziepniekkalns housing estate. And I hope that this topic will be in the center of attention of our society for a while, and it will develop. Thank you.